Hi, everyone. This is Don Davis, your host of Supply Chain Secrets. I am the former executive of Hapag-Lloyd at CMA CGM, and I'm currently the Senior Vice President of NVO Experience here at NiceChecks.
You are now listening to the Supply Chain Secrets Podcast with Don Davis.
And I'd like to welcome you all to the show who are listening. And it's an exciting episode. It's one we talked about doing around about 6 months ago. We are having our Women in Shipping podcast, and we've invited back Krissy Van Neikerk, April Zobel, and Karin Bridges to talk about the topic again. So good afternoon to all of you, and I'm excited to have another show.
We're excited to be here.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks. And you know, the last time we did the show, it was actually the first show without my co-host, Brian Most. So it was a difficult time in my life. You know, I've been doing it with Brian for such a long time. So you helped me through it by having one of our most popular episodes. So I'm really thankful and grateful for that. So thanks for participating and welcome back. You're one of the few two-time guests on Supply Chain Secrets. So I hope you blow everyone else away and you have the third before anyone else. So let's just talk a little bit about you know, what's happened since the last podcast. I think I put a post out there on LinkedIn, really excited about that because it had such a tremendous reception, had around about 200 likes, and they have this thing that they track impressions, had over 7,000 impressions, which for me personally is a lot, but I think for anyone on LinkedIn is a lot. So I think there's a lot of attention around this topic of women in shipping. And maybe April, if you're okay, we could start with you. I mean, what are your reflection since the last time we spoke?
Thanks, Don. First, I want to say I think it was pretty cool when we were all together in New York when we took that picture, that it happened by chance. Not one bit of that was staged. We all just happened to be sitting in the same row together at an event. And I think it's pretty cool that we kind of gravitated towards each other and this came together pretty organically. But to your question, I think there's something incredible that happened after the first recording. It made me hyper aware of what's happening in the market in women in shipping, for lack of a better phrase. That's the title of this. But it made me really think about the impression that the three of us can give to other women in the industry, but also lend a light to women out there looking to be engaged more or have a seat at the table or looking for people to look up to maybe to advance their career or, you know, a couple times since we've had this did the first podcast, people have approached me at events and said, you know, thanks for what you said on that podcast, or have asked how they get out there too. So I think there's this really great pitch point for all of us, three of us specifically, and other women out there, to lean in and go seek those women out there. It's really just, I think, put a highlight on, there's a huge opportunity for women in shipping specifically, but a huge opportunity for some of us veterans to be advocates and push the younger women or new to the environment to take place on the stage.
I think that's such a cool story that people came up to you after the show, and it shows the impact of the podcast, right? Because, you know, we post this and, you know, I don't know how many are exactly downloaded. I don't see that. I'm just the guy hosting the show, but you know, you get these like sound bites from people, which is always fun when people like talk about things and you say like, wow, this is really great. I think it's really inspirational to say that there is a reach out there. We are connecting with people. So that's really super fun. Karin, over to you. I mean, what are your reflections since the last time we spoke in, I think it was round about May, June of this year?
Yeah. So similar to April, I've had a lot of people, both internally at NiceChecks and friends and people a part of my network through ocean shipping, logistics, etc. Listened in and had some good feedback. I've also interviewed some people who like heard about the show, watched the show as I'm interviewing them. So yeah, I felt a little bit like a celebrity, Don. Must be what you have to deal with every day. But I think the big takeaway for me is it really opened discussion about the topic of women in shipping and some of the challenges that we face, sometimes the feeling of isolation, being in a room full of men and maybe not feeling super confident. I think just even being vocal and us three women who are just a small sample in a large network of the entire shipping industry. I think just talking about it helps others feel comfortable, and that encourages them to also engage in the conversation. And I think that's just healthy in a way of supporting each other, being open to talk about these hard things. I think that we're just helping open the door for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just I've had more than one person actually thank me for wanting to talk about it because it's something that's not talked about enough. And I talked about it in our last show. It's just about this whole idea of having awareness is helpful and to elevate people's consciousness to where actually they're thinking about these things versus just, reacting in a way that might feel natural, but that natural way of acting maybe excluding a category. It's so great to talk about. But Krissy, same question to you, and hopefully you've had the same type of celebrity experience that April and Karin have. But what's it been like for you?
So I haven't. I don't think I've quite had the same level of celebrity. So I'm hoping that this time that really comes back for me. I'm looking forward to that. I'm available for appearances. But I was thinking actually one of the things that came out of that podcast for me was watching you kind of have this revelation that there was a big difference for women when it's you're the only woman or one of very few women in the room, and how just kind of bringing it to your attention made you feel like, oh, maybe there's a behavior that you could change. And for me, that it was a realization that even though I'm very focused on other women here at Maersk and other women in the industry and how to kind of pay it forward and lift people up, I also really need to focus on the men around me and educating them and bringing it to their attention because while well intentioned, I think that they often don't realize the environment that we're in with so few women. And so I've been, I wouldn't say extra vigilant, but I've felt more confident in putting forward things, reminding men not to refer to women as girls and reminding them to, reach out for opinions and push a little bit more to create a more inclusive environment. So for me, that was one of the big things that.
Yeah, and fully support that. We need to educate men, and it's helpful to hear it from you because, to your point, it made a huge impact on me the last show. And if I could just share some of my own experiences because it might have had the greatest impact on me potentially out of all of us here, because I think for me it's encouraged a lot of behavior change. And if I could just give you some awareness, like first of all, I think I'm just more situationally aware than I might have been in the past. So when there is one woman in the room or no women in the room, it's certainly something that strikes me and something I'm a lot more conscious of and something that I'm more open to talk about and say, why is this the case? And what can we do to change that? Because are we missing an opportunity here? I think there's something about taking initiative to address situations. And if I could share a story real quick, I was on a business trip in France not too long ago where there were 9 of us going. And it occurred to me that we had one woman on the team, Amy Metzler. And she's not only, surrounded by men, but these men who have years of experience. She's relatively new to the company. She's running project management for us. And so for me, I went out of my way to just talk to Amy and just talk to her about where we were and ask her if she had any questions. But the point about including her, making sure she felt like she was part of the team. And I actually then a couple weeks later talked to Amy about that experience, which I'll get to in a minute. But just that whole point of like taking initiative and saying, hey, there's a situation here. I mean, maybe she feels tremendously comfortable. I don't know, but maybe I should just talk to her and make sure that she does feel comfortable because it's going to be an intimidating situation. I think for my team, I try and create opportunities for women. And I've done some interviews in preparation for this episode just to give some feedback from some of my female colleagues as far as like how important it is to have opportunities. Just again, calling out when we miss opportunities. And, I haven't had a chance to address this golf polo issue, April, but that stood out to me from this last episode. Haven't seen that yet. Might have been the timing, maybe I didn't get invited to golf events too much, but Could be my play there. But anyway, I think that's something we have to fix. But I think it's your question to me, April, is like, what would I do differently in the last episode? And I talked about awareness. I think I've tried to do that, but also deliberately asking for women's opinion when we do things, instead of just asking people for opinions. And sometimes I would just ask a woman, but now being more thoughtful around that is something I've tried to do. So I'm excited about some of the changes I made. I think that's, just part of trying to make an impact. So anyway, I'll just stop talking and see if you have any reaction or comments you'd like to add.
I love that. I know you asked all of us, but me specifically, because we work a little bit more closely together, Dawn, to like hold you accountable for, making these changes, taking these lessons and what you took away from our last discussion. And I think that example of, being in France, noticing that there was one woman in the room and making an effort to make her feel comfortable. And it just happened to simultaneously, I reached out to Amy on the side and asked about that experience. And she made the point of saying how her colleagues, and Dawn, I know you were a huge part of it, like the fact that you made her feel very comfortable. Like, it just makes me feel so good that there are men that are super supportive of women's careers and super supportive of women in awkward or uncomfortable situations. And I love that you not only like listened to what we shared last time, but you really took action and made a difference in someone's experience. So I kudos to you for taking that forward.
Yeah, thanks. And if you don't mind, this might be a good place to give you Amy's version. Because I talked to her then weeks later. I said, hey, I'd like to get your perspective, because it might be interesting for listeners to hear this journey. And she said that, going in and in general as a woman, she feels like mistakes are bigger for women and women might be more harshly judged. So there's like this added pressure for her as a woman in a male dominated industry. And she mentioned that prior to joining Nice Check, she was also in a male-dominated industry, so it's a very similar feeling. She said that for her, support is the number one thing that matters to her, and to feel supported and to just help deal with those feelings of like, I might be judged differently than someone else. When you feel supported, then you don't feel as like conservative when you respond to things. She talked a lot about listening, and that some leaders don't listen enough, that they just talk a lot, but they're not actually listening. And she talked about the importance of being like heard. So when someone's listening, instead of just like drowning her out from talking, that makes an impact. And she just doubled down on saying, just encourage women, just find opportunities. The fact that she was able to participate in something, I mean, it meant a lot to her, but just to demonstrate there are opportunities for women was really powerful for her. So anyway, it was great to get her thoughts. I was really excited to hear from her. I was excited that it was a good experience for her. But I don't know, Krissy, April, do you have any reactions to anything that I've said so far as the last show or Amy's feedback?
I'll chime in first. Krissy, you can go next. I think the one thing I really latched onto in everything that you just shared was the opportunity. I think as a woman in a room, generally of all men, giving the opportunity to speak up or kind of being led to that conversation by a male leader or somebody who's leading that conversation gives you a little more confidence than sometimes being the first one to chime in. And I think once you get that first statement out or that first opinion out, it really opens up as an opportunity to continue to share. And so I think sometimes those first hurdles are really hard for women that are maybe the only one in the room. So once you get past that first conversation or first kind of chime in, and I think you being cognizant of that, Don, has been, I've been in rooms with you lately, meetings, and I think that it's great when you have at least one person aware of there being another female in the room, or, I don't often hide my opinions in a room, but I think once you give another female the opportunity to speak up or speak first, or, it just leads to more. It's kind of that first step. Like, how do you get them over the hurdle to feel comfortable to say the thing that's on their mind? Because there's something on their mind if they're in the room.
Krissy, what about you? Any thoughts that you want to share?
I was just going to say, I think it the feedback that she gave, that's that's the way we should treat each other, right? So it's not as though you need some kind of specific handbook for women or, some kind of special different behavior, listening, empathy, being inclusive. These are the basics. And it's just a matter of being deliberate about it, and ensuring that you do it towards everyone and you bring women into the conversation. And so I think that it's wonderful that she gave you that feedback. And I think it's great she had that experience as well, but also highlights the fact that these are really basic things that we do that we should do in any environment, but especially working environment. And we don't have to change our behavior completely in order to make a good inclusive environment for women. It's just about getting those basics right and being deliberate about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think it's just this. I I think the fact that we're talking about this is really the opportunity, right, to just help educate people, and so they don't feel like. I think to your point, like you don't need a handbook. It's not something we are talking about that's really like elaborate. We're saying like there's some things you should do just to have the awareness and just participate in those opportunities when you see them and to react in a certain way. Again, I think we all have a bit of a default setting that just feels natural and we might act in a certain way because where we're raised or where we're from, et cetera. But just kind of instead of just reacting, just walking around in a state of consciousness, which I think is important as a leader to say, you really have to be switched on and like paying attention to these things because you might be missing opportunities and excluding people and just not getting the most out of them. On this point, I think we should spend some time talking about like, what do we want? What do we want from leaders? What do we want from men? What do we want from women? I mean, what are some things, I've given some examples here, but I think it might be helpful. And Karin, I'm going to start with you just to think about any of those things. If we think about what we want or the types of things we should do, is there anything that's top of mind when you think about that question?
Yeah, I think there's absolutely a lot, but I won't take up the whole rest of the podcast covering them. Certainly top of mind. I mean, I think having a leadership team that is diverse always sets the example of like, diversity of thought at the most senior level, and it gives women in the organization something to like inspire them and have role models that they feel they can achieve. I worked in companies and businesses before where the executive leadership team is always very standard, very male, and I think women tend to feel they can't achieve that level of success because there's no role models that they can see themselves modeling. So I think starting with a leadership team that is diverse and believes in diversity, I think is super important. And as a manager, a woman leader or a male leader, just really, I think back to kind of Krissy, what you were saying, like this isn't necessarily like a woman only thing, but I think as a manager or leader of others, like encouraging your colleagues that they can do and become and be and strive for really anything they want to achieve. And I've had male leaders who've been super supportive and drivers in my career. And I've had women leaders who are not supportive and drivers in my career. And I think it just really depends on the person. But I will say as a leader of others myself, like I always want to push and drive and support all colleagues forward. But I think so it's not necessarily just a woman thing, but I think for men and maybe a little bit of an unconscious bias, they may not like have it in their frame of thought that maybe women need that support just as much as male colleagues do, if not more, to push their career forward. So I think there's a lot that goes into leadership in an organization and managerial support for women, but also men.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that the fact that, you know, leadership has to have some awareness. I mean, I think I've certainly learned that through talking to all of you. And I think that I can see some benefits, and I'm excited to share a story at the end of this question. But, Krissy, I mean, what are your thoughts on, what do you want from any of those categories if you think about leaders or men or other women?
Yeah, I think, I mean, in terms of leaders, and I think from organizations, so I often think about this idea of equality versus equity, right? So, in that picture where you see the two people, and equality is both of them standing on the same plane and not being one can't see over the fence, and equity is them standing at the same height, both being able to see over the fence, so that you're giving people what they need and you're meeting them where they are. So at Maersk, we have a wonderful program called Strategies for Success, which is targeted at women who are developing their careers still and giving them the tools to understand how to navigate the organization, how to plan confidently for their career, and how to navigate their own career and manage their brand and all these different things that are so important. And it is targeted at women for that reason, because they have traditionally not been supported in that way. So for me, I would love to see more of these programs for women throughout all organizations and even across organizations in our industry, because I've seen the positive effects of having this. I share this story because I love it so much, but I recently had a leadership role open in my team, and got to the person who was in the role before was a woman. She moved on to another great role. And then I ended up choosing between two other wonderful women for that role. And it's not because I had to go out and get women to apply, which is something we should also try to do. But this was just the natural way of things. These women were ready for the next step in their careers, and I was very fortunate to be able to have them. So I think things like that put you in a better position to hire women into leadership roles and to expand their career. So that's what I would like to see. And of course, I want to see men support those as well, and be advocates and allies within those programs too.
Yeah, that's really cool. That sounds like a great program at Maersk, and that's really cool. That's targeted towards women. I mean, I think that point about, we take it for granted sometimes as males that everyone has the same skills and that they have the techniques, and to really be deliberate about sharing that with people, I think makes a lot of sense, and that's great. April, same question over you. Is there anything that you think of top of mind that you want from any of those categories?
I think I would actually maybe make this a call to action to the women out there and say, be bold, raise your hand. I think because we're talking about it and because we're seeing so much more about this talked about, women in shipping and diversity in shipping and kind of in every industry, but be bold, be willing to raise your hand and step up to the plate or ask for more. Or when you see something that maybe isn't right or isn't sitting well with you, I think instead of maybe internalizing it, how can you go about that and be the leader to change it? So I think stepping it, up, being willing to be the person who says, hey, this isn't right, or I want the opportunity. How do I get there? And then in the words of Mr. Rogers, look for the helpers, because there's a lot of helpers out there. There's a lot of men in leadership positions who are really waiting for women to take action, to be willing to step into that role. So look for the helpers, look for the people who are out there wanting to see more women on the stage or in the boardrooms. We were all just together at an event, and a leader actually said to me, there weren't many women on the stage this week. And I think that that's kind of twofold. Maybe we didn't look for them, but also who are those women who are willing to step up there and be in that place. So here's my call to action to the women who were at some of these events recently. Go talk to somebody and say, hey, I'd like to be engaged next year. I'd like to be involved. How can I be involved? I think that a lot of us have so much experience and all of these connections. I mean, we're great relationship builders, but what are we doing to put ourselves out there and be vulnerable in rooms where it matters? So that's my call to action to the women out there. You've seen us one time, and now time number 2 is me saying, be bold and be the next person who's on the Women in Shipping podcast.
I love that. I think that's such an important point to give the feedback to some of these events, to say, hey, where were the women? There was a missed opportunity here. Because I think it's just creating that awareness. I don't know that it's a conscious decision that I'm going to exclude somebody. But when you reflect on it, you might think, oh, wow, yeah, I didn't do a good job of that. So I think calling that to people's attention, and I love the fact you're saying like, hey, let's ask for it. Let's ask for those opportunities when we realize that. I think that's super powerful. I do want to share another story because I interviewed another person in preparation for this show, and this person, Caroline Weaver, she works in my team. And I think she's been with Neikerk for a year and relatively new to the industry. So she was at Flexport and then joined Neikerk. So let's say 5 years of work experience. And someone I regard as a superstar, like on my team. She's like a tremendous talent. And I wanted to sit down and talk to her because I wanted to understand like what's your journey been like as a relatively new person to the workforce and what's her experience been. And she talked about some of the same things Amy did and that we've talked about, where she talked about support, being supported from her managers. And she felt like her manager at Flexport gave her a lot of support and guided her on things that she might not have understood at the time, but she understood better later in her career, when she was exposed to different situations. Like, now I know why she wanted me to have this skill set. But she said, she's been encouraged to take opportunities at her company. And that's really been helpful, that she didn't feel like she was being excluded. She was instead being invited to participate in things. And she talked about that, like, just on a personal basis, that, her mom didn't work growing up. And she was, a tremendous woman and was involved in different things, but she didn't work. And, she didn't have this model. And it's something that she had seen like later in life. So there might be things because of how she was raised that just didn't come naturally to her. But the fact that she's like supported, she's encouraged, and that there's an opportunity has really helped her be confident. Because when I see her today, and she's, like I said, been with our company for a year, she's a tremendous talent, and she's a leader in my team, and like the gold standard for what we want from an employee. And it's just been great to see that be part of her journey, to feel like, okay, she's on the right track. She feels like she's supported. And I feel like we're getting the best version of her. And it's through some of these things, through having opportunities. But anyway, I just wanted to share that story. I don't know if any of you have a reaction to that, but I like me personally, I'm pretty excited about it.
I think I have an immediate reaction, and I think that is the word that you used, invited. When you take young talent, no matter the case, but specifically young, talented women in an industry where maybe they might not have experience with what those rooms look like or opportunities that exist to them, and you invite them into the conversation or invite them into an opportunity, it builds so much confidence at a young age, an impressionable age, but gives them an opportunity to look for more. And Caroline's an incredible woman. I would echo your statements. And so, but I think the thing to maybe latch onto that, to like tag onto that, is young women inspiring other young women. So maybe Caroline can take this moment and go talk to other women in the industry about, hey, I feel really supported in this network. But, positivity breeds positivity. So if she's feeling engaged, that goes for every organization out there that hires young, talented women. We have this one great case of you kind of sharing about Caroline and Amy. Other organizations can do the exact same thing. You build positivity, you invite them into the room, and it brings more women into the workforce.
Yeah, that's great. And I really wanted to talk about Caroline because I feel like in my career, she's like in the top range of people I've worked with in terms of like talent and ambition and drive. And I'm excited about that. But I also think it's important to say like, hey, what was your journey like? And to talk about that on this show, because there could be another Caroline Weaver out there that didn't get the opportunity, that doesn't feel encouraged. And are we missing opportunities to develop people? Because as we already talked about, like it might feel harder and you may not have had those role models. So I think as leaders to like recognize that and to talk about it is pretty exciting. So, any other thoughts before I move on to the next question? Nope. All right, good. So I just want to talk a little bit about events, and this could be about events in shipping or maybe in other industries, but I'd love to get some thoughts on anything that you've seen that you think has really resonated, where they've done a good job of delivering a message, or when you look to the future, and I'm going to start with you on this question, Krissy, is there anything that's like top of mind that you say, this event, I know they're doing this, or anything you've seen since we last spoke where you saw, wow, I went to this event, did a terrific job. I'd like to share that story.
I feel like you maybe started with the wrong person because I don't really have any good examples. And I haven't seen any, since we talked, anything that's like either female specific or highlighting that. And yeah, so I don't really have a good
Yeah,
one.
Krissy, I was going to chime in. I think one of the things that you shared with me recently was that some of the specific conferences that you have gone to for export exempt commodities, that you started to really see more women either in the audience or speaking, and that may be like a trend that we were starting to see more and more. I know, April, you mentioned another event maybe where there wasn't a strong women presence, but I think positively, it's positive if you're starting to see some movement on that front. I know we talk a lot about being the only person in a room in a meeting, but I think it's also very similar at an event. And April, I think you asked me also at this last event, there was a woman sitting behind us, kind of closed off to herself. And you said, who is that? And I'm like, we were like, let's go talk to her. Let's, invite her in, because I think the four of us gravitated to each other because we know each other and we're supportive of each other. But let's also, when there's someone sitting by themselves or feeling kind of, not sure of who to engage with, like, introducing yourself and making them feel comfortable and welcome to participate, I think is something that we should all challenge ourselves to do.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point. And I kind of forgot about that. But so I've been very fortunate to speak on 2 panels this year, both at exporter conferences. And both panels, I was not the only woman. The last one I was on was moderated by a woman as well. So, so that's good to see. I think, seeing a mix of men and women on panel, more women in the room, and, just actually looking forward to TPM this year, because this will be my second TPM, and I hope that I'll see both of you guys there. But also just saying, what could we do as a group to maybe get together with more women and do something even informal, as a way of networking and promoting women at TPM. I think that would be super exciting.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea. April, over to you.
I'd love to chime in. I have seen such a shift this year. I've been fortunate to speak on 2 export panels, and then a carrier asked me to moderate an event. Hapag Lloyd, I'll give them a huge shout out here. They had an event in Atlanta and a panel of incredible thought leaders in our industry, and they asked me to moderate. And it was very intentional on their part. And I think that's an incredible sign for women in shipping and giving us an opportunity. And but I also want to kind of make a point about, I was at the Charleston, the South Carolina International Trade Conference, and seeing Barbara Melvin deliver an address gave me chills. So I think that she's a woman that I kind of point my North Star towards in terms of being willing to stand up there and give an impassioned state of the port speech, but also really set a tone and a stage for women as leaders in the industry. And so being able to sit on a panel there was also really great for me to be a woman on a stage that there was a lot of men at. But I think that there's always room for more. And so I think it's kind of up to a few of us to keep nudging others to be willing to speak up.
Yeah, and I think that point you raised earlier, April, about recognizing events and seeing opportunities. And I think, it probably makes sense to, as we make observations and, you see these, like Krissy mentions, like I was on a panel, that was not the only woman. You mentioned, April, you've been on panel. And, sharing that feedback when we don't see it and saying these are missed opportunities, because I think it's just, again, part of that education process to say, maybe we missed something here and the organizers aren't aware of it. Right. And I mean, to be fair, sometimes it is hard to get people on certain topics. And, I've been part of these events before, and are they just looking in the wrong places is what I'm wondering. But I think to help that along, it's really impactful. Karin, over to you. Is there anything that you want to add as far as like, I know you had some comments already, but is there anything else that you'd like to add as far as events or anything that you see, that you've seen in the past since we last spoke?
Yeah, no, just one point that I did want to add, and it was a conversation, April, you and I had recently was, you do a lot of panels, right? You're called upon frequently on expert panels or different, you mentioned the carrier asking you to moderate. Like, I think you do a lot of that. And then you have women who, after the fact, come up and say, so great to see you on stage, like really happy to have a woman speaking and your presence, etc. And I love that you always go back to that call of action. Like, I want to see you on stage next. Like, raise your hand, like ask to participate. Like, it doesn't have to be April at every event. And I know I'm exaggerating, but I know you do a lot of that. But that it's always that, great to see women out there, but just the call to action and encouraging others to stand up and say, like, I think I can add value to this conversation and I want to participate.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I will co-sign that every day of the week. Every woman who has reached out this year has been incredible. For them to come and say, thank you for speaking up. But I will continue to say to all of you, it's your turn. How can I help you? Who can I introduce you to? You're never going to be ready. There is never going to be a moment where you're going to say, yeah, I'm totally ready for this. I can nail this. You're going to be nervous and it's going to be hard. It's going to be intimidating, but it is such a great opportunity for you, for your organization to be the voice, to be the person up there. And I mean, I would do anything to help other women lend their voice to a stage, because I think it is such an opportunity and it is so empowering to get to lend your opinion and your voice to new rooms and to new people.
Yeah, I love that, April, and thanks for sharing that. And well, we're at a point in the show where you get to ask me a question. So you get to play podcaster, because I've been peppering all of you with several questions. But before we do that, I do want to recognize Karin, because I think, Karin, you've done a lot at Neikerk. I mean, we obviously work at the same company, and I hear a lot of support you give women at the company. And I just want to say thank you for that, because it's really been great to see. I think some of those people I've already mentioned, but I know there's a ton of others I haven't, where you've given them support. And I'm excited that when I talk to a lot of these women, they'll tell me like, well, I talked to Karin, we have this group, we have this session. And I think it's so terrific, because I feel like at our company, there is a ton of support, and some of those things we've talked about, that people feel like they're encouraged. And the fact that, like, we had this conversation about Amy on the same event, and I'm trying to do something on my end, you're trying to do something on your end. I'm like, this is really cool that we're both like trying to help people. So, but thank you for that, because I think your role and leadership there has been really terrific.
So thank you for that, Don.
No problem. So we're at the point of the show. Like I said, I've been peppering you question. Is there anything you want to ask the podcaster? Go ahead, fire away, whoever's ready.
I'm ready, Don. Are you ready?
Oh boy, you got me last time, April. So I don't know if I'm ready, but we'll give it a shot.
I'm gonna give you some kudos. I think that after our last podcast, I think you took a lot to heart, and I think sharing that openly with us was really powerful, quite frankly. So my ask to you would be, how can we have similar conversations with leadership of men leaders in our organizations, or even outside of them, to maybe see things the way that you have since our last podcast?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, thanks for saying that. And I can say, like, wholeheartedly, it made an impact. I mean, I loved hearing your stories, and, as preparation for this show, I listened to that show again recently, and it always gets me excited to listen to it, because I think it was such a great conversation. And I think it's, I think there's enough content here that, we have to encourage people to listen to the show. And this is not a shameless plug for the show. I don't get any sort of like benefit or perk from the show. I just do it for fun, because I love doing it and I love talking to people, but there's really nothing else in it for me. And, but I think it is an opportunity to share with people, because I think that point Krissy made, where it was like, we don't need this handbook or textbook, and there's some simple things that you could do. And, I've been part of some, emotional intelligence type of training and learning there. And it talks a lot about just getting out of that default setting and getting into a state of consciousness where you're aware of situations and emotions and how you're feeling. And instead of reacting where you might be upset in a grocery store long line because it's, everyone's in your way, you might have some empathy and say like, wow, these people are just trying to get the prescription right for their sick family member. They're not trying to be disruptive to my day. They're just trying to get something else right. But the point of like having awareness and not just reacting and like thinking about situations, I think is step one, is like training your brain to think that way. But then two, saying, this isn't that hard. Instead of like people I might consider myself to be closer to. I mean, I didn't know Amy that well before this trip, but to like just say, you know what, I'm going to make a point to go talk to her instead of talking to, Matt Marshall that I know pretty well. Like, that's a choice I made. And it's not like a huge ask on my part. It's actually something simple. But if it brings out the best in her, then that's terrific. That's a huge win. And to get people more comfortable. And I think there was enough points of validation is it's like, just helping people feel more comfortable. I think that's it. But I think it's just getting those points out there that I hope people can listen to the show and it like connects with them the same way it did for me. But that, I think, to hear these stories, because I think we're all speaking from an authentic place, is really super powerful. And that would be my takeaway. I also plan on, making some posts on LinkedIn as part of the show when we chop it up. So I think there'll hopefully be some good connecting points to encourage others. Okay, I'm going to give you the opportunity. I know we've been talking for over 40 minutes, but are there any other questions you want to ask me? Otherwise, we'll sign off the show. Anyone?
I have another question.
Oh boy. Okay.
So I'm curious, because you talked a little bit about how people can be stuck in their default reaction, right? And I see this from not a dig on men, but I see this from men sometimes where they say, I don't really see why I need to make an extra effort because I treat everyone the same and I have a woman on my team and I don't really think I need to change my behavior. If you were talking to a man who felt that way, who was kind of set in that mindset, what would you say to him to help him understand what you understand now?
I would say that, have you asked a woman if there's anything that you can do differently that would help them in their day-to-day life? And that would be my challenge. Like, hey, you know what? There's probably people out there. And listen, I am not saying I got this right because I do not have it right. I'm not 100% right. There's things I can do better. I know that as a person and I want to get better as a person. And that's just me. But if you think that you're there, then just ask other people because that'll be a point of validation for you. If you could talk to your colleagues, because I can tell you when I talked to Amy and Caroline in this example and in preparation for the show, I asked them, like, what could I do better? Like, what can I do as a leader to help you and encourage you? And I think by asking people that question, and I think one of the cool things that Amy said to me was like, just by you talking about this, like, means a lot. It's impactful. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. But I'm not doing it just to talk about it. I really want to have an impact, right? So I would say to anyone out there, like, maybe you got it all right. And maybe everyone is like, terrifically excited, but just use some points of validation. Ask some people at your company, their perspective. And if you're not asking, like, if they're the ones telling you you can do nothing better, then you got it all right. If they say, hey, I'd like to be encouraged or have opportunities to do that, then you kind of know, like, maybe there's some things I have to do. But I think that's a great starting point.
That's great. I'm pleased to hear that. I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
No problem. Karin, you're the last one. You can ask me a question, or are you good?
We can close it out, Don.
All right. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Like we committed last time to doing this on a regular basis. I think we have to do it again. So maybe early part of next year, maybe after TPM, we could do some reflections and have some observations. I think that might be really cool. And I also want to just revalidate for those that might not have heard the first show and are listening to this show that we encourage anyone to reach out to any of us about support or ideas or anything on this topic. Feel free. I think we're all open and we're all excited to talk about it. So everyone's nodding here. So that's been revalidated. So great. So thanks again for coming on the show, and everyone who's listening out there, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget, give us feedback, rate us, review us wherever you find our podcast, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you have your download. So thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Supply Chain Secrets Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast network.